Can you connect this to Kitab and Hidayah?
Kitab and Hidayah? Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're going to see that right now. Yeah, I know last time was a bit off. Yeah, but don't worry. We keep going back to the same center. Right, we're going to go back to the same center.
Takes you back to Kitab and Hidayah.
Right, so it's going to keep on taking us to the same center because that is the main foundation. You're going to see it right now. So here we go. Last time we actually covered a number of, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, first of all, last time we actually covered a number of different issues, and we talked about, right there, we talked about, if you can turn off the lights, that would be great, Azadi. وَلَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ مُوسَى بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ ثُمَّ اتَّخَذْتُمُ الْعِجْلَ مِنْ بَعْدِ. Wait. How did we get there? That wasn't so. That's it. Good.
That's enough.
That's enough. Yep, that's enough. How did we get there? Hold on. What? Oh, wait a minute. Sorry about that, you guys. When I zoomed it. Okay, here we go. This is where we left off then. وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ أَنَّ لَهُمْ جَنَّاتٍ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ كُلَّمَا رُزِقُوا مِنْهَا مِنْ ثَمَرَةٍ رِزْقًا قالوا هذا الذي رزقنا من قبل. Of course, we talked about a number of different things in where we started out with يا أيها الناس اعبدوا ربكم, where that is the continuing foundation, where why were we created, and then there's why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us hidayah, where's the kitab in this whole context of all of this. Now, when you would see these contexts in where there's the iman billah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's that part in where la ilaha illallah, and then there's the part of Muhammadun Rasulullah in where it's taking you into laying out what makes al-kitab as the guidance. So we talked about that last time. And then we talked about وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, as in contrast to those that had rejected faith in Allah Almighty, which is what was talked about on the top right there, and then faith in the Prophet ﷺ, and then in contrast to those that have rejected comes in those that had embraced two items, which is al-hidayah and al-kitab, which is guidance and the book that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had revealed the different details that prove guidance and the different details that prove on what is meant by guidance and what makes up guidance. Then the other part, of course, in this part of it, in Allah la yastahi yadriba mathalan ma ba'udah. I want you to look at this one because this is directly related to the previous ayat. Remember, all the Quran is actually coherent. So remember here when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually talked about a parable, there's this similitude in where it's trying to get an idea closer to your understanding by comparing things to what you know of. So in order to give you an idea of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about in terms of guidance and misguidance, here we talked about before how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave that comparison with somebody building a fire or making a fire, and then when they get into the dark part of it, the darkness, and they turn out the fire. In other words, it basically is gone out of sight, how they then find themselves in the darkness, and then how other ones, they want to shut out reality by trying to close their ears from hearing the truth or closing and blocking their eyes from seeing the truth. And they think that they're actually safe by doing that when reality is surrounding them in all corners. So the kuffar absolutely did not like such examples, and they wanted to ridicule the Quran by ridiculing the examples, when not only in these two examples, but in other examples in where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala compares the plots that they are plotting, or the plots and the gods and the idols that they are worshiping, to the plots or to the strings of cobwebs, to the strings of spider webs, and that they are actually as weak and they're easily to be torn in that way. In other words, all the plots, they are not steadfast. They're just going to really fall apart. Now, the same thing when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually talked about how their weakness is so vast, the weakness is so big that even if a fly were to take something out of them, they would not be capable of returning it back to the way that it was chemically, that is. Now, then the kuffar wanted to ridicule those examples and actually said, why would God actually make or put in examples of the world around us of a spider or even a fly or such a thing? So here the response, or even when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala compared the fire and to give them an understanding of what they're actually doing, they started ridiculing that, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responded to it by saying, Inna Allah la yastahyi an yadriba mathalan ma ba'udah, that the Lord Almighty, the word la yastahyi, the word la yastahyi can mean Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not shy, does not refrain, and can also mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not get dishonored in any way by bringing about such parables, even if the parable was as minuscule as a ba'udah. A ba'udah is the smallest insect, well, one of the smallest insects that they would know, whether it's a mosquito or even if we're talking about a small mosquito or something as a mosquito. In the end, it's a ba'udah. فَمَا فَوْقَهَا. Now, the word فَمَا فَوْقَهَا, it does not, it means what is above it, but this is not talking about what is above it to mean the sky per se, but what is above it, meaning even if we're talking about animals or insects that are a lot more sophisticated in their creation, or in what people would regard sophisticated in their powers, or even in their making, even if it was even more sophisticated than that. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to refrain or abstain or feel dishonored by bringing about the parables and bring about the examples by the things that were created, even if it was something as small as a mosquito, or as small as the smallest known insect to them, or even something that is bigger, whether we're talking about probably a bee, or even if we're talking about the skies, or whether we're talking about the universe at large, or the solar system, or whatever it is. فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. As for those that believe, they would know, فَيَعْلَمُونَ أَنَّهُ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّهِمْ. As for those that believe, they would know that this is the truth from their Lord Almighty. What is the point? Well, the point is, it's not ridiculing the evidence, it's by actually bringing about evidence that refute the evidence. And this is something really important to mention, is that a lot of those out there, and it especially happens from the atheist, or the atheist professors or atheists within universities, colleges, or even many that are surrounding us, especially in the midst of the Muslims, pretty much civilization-wise or economically, or right now, historically speaking, we're actually considered the defeated civilization in this battle east or Islam and the West. We are yet considered the defeated community because of a number of different reasons, whether we're talking about economically, politically, geographically, and the list goes on and on. The Muslim world is right now under Western colonization. Western colonization means abusing the interest that even those lands actually produce. So civilization-wise, even when we're talking about education-wise, we're definitely in the back, and that builds in within the Muslim ego, and especially the youth, the sense and the feeling that they are somehow backward, that they are somehow on the margin, that yet they have to, in order to feel fit in, that they have to embrace the Western/liberal lifestyle in order to feel that they are actually they're actually the civilized, or they're the ones that are part of those that are victorious. It is very common that these ways of trying to make people feel that they are actually on the end of the scale of civilization, it brings in a lot of let me call it psychological defeat. The especially within the youth, especially within the minds of those that are going to universities, feeling that, and that was the mockery that even the Arab were bringing in to the Muslims at the time, because the Muslims were still a very small minority compared to the vastness of whether we're talking about the people of the book at the time, the Jews and the Christians, or of course the Christians were considered the Byzantine Empire, or even idolatry was taking its vibe, its victorious vibe from the Persians. And that's why when the Persians and the Byzantine Empire were at war, the pagan Arab were actually supporting the Persians, even though the pagan Arab were really nothing but laborers, literally laborers, and they were just colonized by the Persians or colonized by the Byzantine Empire. This is the truth of the matter. But they still felt that vibe that they were getting from the idolatry and from the polytheism that the Persians were actually practicing. Now, having that being said, the Muslims being a minority, it was so easy to ridicule the monotheism, to ridicule Tawheed, to ridicule the Prophet ﷺ, to ridicule the Muslims at the time, because they were still in the beginning and the very early birth of Islam. So here, that's why the word la yastahyi was actually used, because you want to read the context, because they were ridiculing, why would your God actually speak of such and such? Let me tell you this. 3 days ago or 2 days ago, I was in a funeral. And it wasn't the funeral for the sister that we actually announced about. It was actually a funeral for my family members. In the funeral, one of the women comes up and actually brings the Sahih al-Bukhari and says, look at this. What are we going to tell, and how are we going to answer the West regarding a lot of the ethics in this book? And of course, there are a number of different things that you could actually see in between the lines of what she had said, which is feeling the supremacy of the West. And therefore, in order for me to regard Sahih al-Bukhari as holding any type of weight, I would have to first get the Western approval that this holds some weight, that this holds some what is the word? Some genuinity. Did we necessarily need Western approval to regard something as ethical or not ethical? Why did we actually get to that point? When the West itself is actually going from corruption to more corruption, even though many would weigh victory or would weigh some type of success based on money. Whoever said that to weigh anybody's success is based on money? Or even if we're actually talking about scientific research. Scientific research is one side of the story, which if somebody would study how things function, whether we're talking about atheist China or whether we're talking about a Hindu in India, or whether we're talking about a Christian in the West, that's not necessarily the religion that motivated necessarily that research. It's actually how you put the pieces together, how you put the different pieces together to make a complete picture, a complete understanding of the truth that surrounds you. So if you had right now, we know that Japan, for example, is actually excelling by far the Christian West. Does that make atheism or Buddhism or Confucianism or Taoism actually a better religion because they are in technology that they have superseded and went farther than the West? Absolutely not. Because when you research something, when you research how something functions, technology, etc., that's a totally different end.
They worship work and sleep.
Absolutely. That's a totally different end. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you right there, there are certain sunan in this world, there are certain patterns. You study those patterns, you'll be able to decode a number of different patterns and be able to get to probably even making from those codes of the patterns in this world, be able to do different fragments, from these fragments of information, be able to make some kind of a production. You'll be able to do that. But that's not everything about life. But it's really sad how many times we don't realize how ridiculing, and I'd like to call it that philosophy of condescending, it happens a lot, especially at universities. And as a chaplain, I see it all the time in where one method of trying to put you in a fitna is not necessarily because the person in front of you has an argument, but because the person in front of you may not have an argument except one, which is to work on bringing you into a psychological defeat. Putting you in that psychological defeat, and a lot of the students at the universities actually fall for it, where the professor is putting them, well, your prophet did this, your Islam says this, and then the students, they would feel cornered because they couldn't answer the question, or they couldn't even feel or get the feeling of, well, I am somehow superior with the Aqidah or even with the Islam right there. And it's really important to discuss this point, because when we're talking about liberalism, and that's why I always like to speak about that foundation of what makes right now what we think of as human rights, or etc. And we don't realize that the word even human rights, as an example, was not actually used until probably in the 40s. And that when we're speaking about different words or terminologies used in ethics, or of course, when we talk about ethics, we're talking about Sharia here. A lot of these terms, a lot of these definitions, and what I mean by definitions is really what defines womanhood, what defines manhood, what defines humanhood. This is really important. And right now, we would fall, and many. The other day, I was watching something that was in Lebanese, and this guy comes up. And this is the host. This person is a trans, and the mother, Lebanese Muslim, she was with her hijab, and the mother was so humiliated. And she said that this is not acceptable in my religion. This is not acceptable in Islam. The host's response was, you do understand that according to the World Health Organization and according to the studies, that this is not an illness, and therefore you have to accept it as such. And that if you don't accept it as such, then you've got a problem right there. What was used? Of course, at that moment, she didn't really know how to respond to it. All she said was, at the end of the day, yes, I understand that, she basically succumbed to this definition that was thrown at her, didn't know how to respond. She got bewildered how to respond to this when it was thrown at her, didn't know. And this is really important, is that when we speak of Aqidah, this is actually speaking about the foundation of why is Islam superior to all the different philosophies out there. How do we actually speak about that? You first have to know, you first have to keep in mind that the definitions that are laid out at you are more of a narrative of a lobby that defined it for you. It does not make it factual. Where do these definitions come from? Who defines them, etc., is basically is basically certain lobbies, and then many times they're actually presented as if they were backed up by science. Presented to us, to the masses, that they're backed up by science, therefore going against what the narrative is played out at you is somehow making you look and seem as if you are against science, as if you are backwards, as if somehow you don't actually have any evidence to support what you're saying. And then it becomes more of a psychological defeat type of war, without you realizing. Now, having that being said, here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts the izzah, lays out that izzah. Inna Allah la yastahi. The Lord Almighty does not abstain. The Lord Almighty does not feel dishonored to actually say the truth. And then, as for those that believe, and know that it is the truth, they will actually stand up to support it. And as for those, as for those that want to deny the truth, they will just continue with their type of that psychological defeat and trying to make you feel condescended, feel defeated, feel like you don't have an argument by saying, by saying, what did God want from this example and from this parable? What did he want from it? In other words, wanted to ignore the whole theme of that parable, wanted to grow the whole theme and actually bring it as if it was the story of that bug, or as if it is the story of that insect, or whatever have you. يُضِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا. Yes, ma'am.
You know, that ayah made me reflect a lot.
It made you?
It made me think and reflect a lot.
Right.
Especially about COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I think COVID is a perfect, I'm not going to say a perfect example, but at least one of an example.
Absolutely.
Because, believer can look at COVID and say, you know what, thank God, because of COVID, my iman increased, my this increased, I was able to do this and that. But then people who don't believe in Allah will question, but what is this thing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. They don't realize that, no matter how arrogant and how proud you are. And right now, when we're looking all these countries, this little small virus that they were not even able to identify, and right there it controlled and rechanged all their capitalist competitions,
The
and
whole market shut down.
the whole market, everything.
Australia, half of it burned.
Yep.
Just the fire.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no
Just
Allah, there's Mother Nature.
absolutely. Subhanallah. So that's why يُضِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا. Now I want you to look at the word, because this is a passive verb. Pay attention to this one. This is a passive verb, that يُضِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا. That he, if I were to just say the exact wording of it is that he, that is Allah Almighty, misguides many. But wait a minute. If we actually take it in that sense, it's actually not accurate. It's a passive verb. Right there, يُضِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا is actually a passive verb. It's not that Allah misguides. All right? It's not that Allah misguides. It's that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created, again, we're going back to the pattern. Allah created within you certain things that you can use it to guide you, or you can use it to misguide you. You've got different, for example, you've got an element that you want to struggle for survival, you want to live. All right. Now, this element within you, the struggling for survival, makes you want food, makes you want to drink, makes you want reproduction. These elements within you, you can choose to put them in guidance, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had regulated them in order to give you that continuation of life, just like animals. Or you can actually feed that element, that drive within you, and make it take you into a different corner. It's not that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that misguides you. In other words, you cannot blame Allah Almighty that he's the one that just did not send you somehow guidance somewhere, sometime, and actually give you the guidance coming at you, but it was actually you that chose to feed a certain drive and then that led you to that corner. Having that being said, يُضِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the elements, the different reasons within you, but in the end, وَمَا يُضِلُّ بِهِ إِلَّا الْفَاسِقِينَ. I want you to get to this one. I'm going to come to the word fasiqeen for a little bit before I get to وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا. The word al-fasiqeen. You know, when a fruit dries out, what happens to the peel? It starts coming out. When a fruit dries out, it starts coming out. The peel starts exacerbating, separating away from the actual fruit. Right? You guys see that? This is actually called al-fisq. All right? It's when the peel starts separating away from the actual core or the actual fruit itself, right? So what does that actually mean? So the word fasiq, you've got the core and you've got the peel, the outer shell. So those that actually chose to go and take the path of delusion have actually exacerbated themselves away from the core. All right? They chose to exacerbate themselves away from the core. What is the core? What core? Hang on to this one. We're going to come back to it. All right? Let's put the core in the fridge, let it warm, let it cool just a little bit. We're going to come back to the core, all right? I hope you guys are not hungry now. It's not Ramadan, so just hold on to the core, all right? Let's come back to it. وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا. يَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا, that he guides. Notice here يُضِلُّ, and here's يَهْدِي. يَهْدِي, that the Lord Almighty guides many. So here's one thing. Are the people that are misguided more than the people that are guided, or is it the opposite? Notice that the word يُضِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا preceded, it came first than يَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا. The majority is actually in misguidance, not in guidance. So the system of voting, all right, the system of voting is not a system that is necessarily genuine or right or authentic as a method to prove whether something is right or wrong. The system of voting, masses, most of the people are actually doing the wrong thing. And I love this. I'm just going to quote.
Wait, you're getting me lost.
I'm getting you lost. Let's do it again. So here's the thing, is that how did the people react to the parable? How did the people react and relate to Al-Hidayah and Al-Kitab?
A lot of them, they choose misguidance.
Most of them choose misguidance. Now, here's the thing. When people, many would say, I remember Fatima when she was a little girl. She was almost 4 years old. She looked out the window and said, Mom, she was only 4 years old. I remember that very well. She looked out the window and said, Mom, how come we see more non-Muslims than Muslims outside the window? And I said, well, we happen to live in a non-Muslim country. But of course, she was only 4 years old. Not much to understand. She just said, so Mom, how come we see more people dressed not like you than the people that are dressed like you? I said, well, there are more people that are not Muslim than Muslim, and more people choosing to dress otherwise because they want to be distant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and want to follow their whims. But of course, for a 4-year-old, that was too much of a very hard answer. It's more complex than actually talking about the philosophy of, do we base right and wrong based on majority or not? She was still too young. But that's a question that, when we put it philosophically speaking, it's always, there is something, I would say, a lot more, there is something a lot more sophisticated in philosophy, even though it asks the same simple question. Do we base truth on how many people support that? Do we base it on the number of people that agree and think that it's right? Or is truth based on other things? Well, that's the same thing when we're talking about the philosophy of ethics. Although the word philosophy of ethics sounds like a very jargon, very sophisticated term, it is actually very simple. What is the basis that we use in order to define something right and wrong? Is it how many people apply it? Or is it value? Or is it based on the consequence? Or is it based on how many people, if it were to be applied at a universal level, how many people and what it will lead in a large number and eventually? This is the simple thing about all the philosophy of ethics.
So what is?
But the words that are used in it are really just to mean just what I said. When somebody comes up to you and actually says, we're talking about the theological argument, or talks about the categorical imperative or whatever it is, it's really just simplifying just what I said. It's nothing big. But then people are so afraid of these big words and they just take you in awe, and it makes you look like maybe they do have something that is so sophisticated that it doesn't seem like the Quran can answer anything. No. Calm down.
So now I understand why you're saying the voting, because it's based on the biggest
It's
number.
based on the
You
biggest
cannot
number.
have
It
fairness and
considers,
truth based on
absolutely, it's considering that the
It's
majority,
always right.
absolutely, it's considering that the majority should be right. Or even if you don't consider the majority is right, you just have to accept the majority to actually, and embracing the majority opinion in order to embrace people's wishes. If you don't embrace the majority's opinion, you are then somehow an extremist. You are then somehow wrong. You are then somehow contradicting what is observed as truth by the masses. And this is why when you look at يُضِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا, to take the quantity of people and the quantity of how many support a particular opinion is actually not the method that makes something factual or not. It's not the quantity. It's actually what it is itself. What is the principle? Does that argument contain any evidence to prove it actually right or wrong? To prove it right or to disprove it as wrong. وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا وَمَا يُضِلُّ بِهِ. Again, look at this, يُضِلُّ وَمَا يُضِلُّ بِهِ. Here's a question. Does that mean that the Lord Almighty misguides al-fasiqin, and therefore these people were forced to be misguided and that their free will was somehow frozen, canceled out? No.
It's like the hut. Maridan.
So here are two things. There's al-mashi'a al-kawniyya and al-mashi'a al-tashri'iyya. What is the difference? God Almighty created you and gave you the free will to choose. All right. Now, here's the thing. If somebody chose to go to the masjid, will Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala somehow put a door and tell them, I didn't want that yet?
No.
Not yet. No. What if they actually chose to go to a wrong place? It's open.
Yeah, it's
You
okay.
can go ahead. But can somebody claim that if God didn't want me to go there, he would have sent some kind of a tornado to slap me away from taking that decision and made the cars go differently?
No, I would not have
No.
problems.
There's the part about mashi'a kawdiyya. Al-mashi'a al-kawniyya is basically the pattern that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this world in, and part of the pattern is to give you free will. But there's the other part, which is al-mashi'a al-tashri'iyya, which is the will of legislature. What is the will of legislature? The will of legislature, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا يَرْضَى لِعِبَادِهِ الْكُفْرِ. The Lord Almighty does not will and does not accept that people would disbelieve in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Got it? So the Lord Almighty gave you the free will, but he does not accept
You pick the wrong.
that you picked the wrong thing. So you cannot say, well, if he wanted me, why did he will it for me? The Lord Almighty, when you look at the word will, did God will that I go to that wrong place? Well, he did not will it in the sense of want you, which is the legislature part, because the Lord Almighty does not will for you to do the wrong thing. But he had predestined to mean he had foreknowledge that that was the decision you're going to make. All right. So what does that mean? When we look at irrida, the Lord Almighty being content, the Lord Almighty is never content over wronghood. And that's why وَمَا يُضِلُّ بِهِ إِلَّا الْفَاسِقِينَ, that they're the ones that chose the elements, that chose the pattern, and therefore they were misguided. But let's continue. وَمَا يُضِلُّ بِهِ إِلَّا الْفَاسِقِينَ. كثيرة.
The misguided are many, and then
And the guided ones are many as well. And the guided ones are many as well. Now here, وَمَا يُضِلُّ بِهِ إِلَّا الْفَاسِقِينَ. The ones, وَمَا يُضِلُّ بِهِ, the ones that are going to be misguided are the ones that are al-fasiqeen. Who are al-fasiqeen? Remember the core that we just put in the fridge? The core and the peel? Right, now we're getting to it. Now, وَمَا يُضِلُّ بِهِ إِلَّا الْفَاسِقِينَ. They're those people that separated away from the core. And that's why when they separated themselves away from the core, that's why they were easily misguided. All right? So what is the core after all? Well, let's see the core and what that core is. Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
Let's look at the core. The core, الذين ينقضون عهد الله من بعد ميثاقه ويقطعون ما أمر الله به أن يوصل ويفسدون في الأرض. أولئك هم الخاسرون. Let's get to two things here. So the first one is الفاسقين, and then two colons right there, the colon. Who are الفاسقين? Well, الفاسقين are the people that separated themselves away from the core. All right. What about them? Well, those are the people. The word is ينقضون. We're still talking about the core. Hold on. So what is the core? ينقضون actually means to untie. ينقضون can also mean to demolish. To demolish, to untie. What are we untying and what are we demolishing here? Demolishing what? No, those are the الفاسقين. من بعد ميثاقه, after it was tied. So what was actually tied? Sorry about that. Okay, here we go. So when we look at من بعد ميثاقه, what is الميثاق? What is الميثاق? الميثاق can mean convent, can mean a promise, can mean an agreement, and can also mean a knot that is tied and securely tied. All right. So what is that? Now, I'm going to take this tafsir right there because we're going to jump on a number of different ayat. I want you guys to pay attention because there's no way that you can actually understand an ayah without going to the number of different things that relate you with that ayah. So we're first going to go on, I put it actually right there. So hold on, we're going to go to Surah Shura. All right. I want you guys to look at this ayah. All right. Maybe I can actually split this one. No, I can't. All right, I want you guys to look at this ayah. Remember, this is page 14. All right, we're going to go to page 481. Let's go to it. Not Ghafir, we need this Shura. So let's go like this and go right directly to that Surah Shura. Okay, so we've got a couple of more pages to go. Let's go like that and scroll down really quick. Watch it. Here we go. Fussilat and then Shura. All right, here we go. There's the Surah Shura right there. All right. When you actually look at the ayah where it was saying الذين ينقضون عهد الله من بعد ميثاقه ويقطعون ما أمر الله به أن يوصل ويفسدون في الأرض. What page were we on before? So this is 493. Let's go now. I want you to look at this ayah right there. I want you to remember it. شرع لكم من الدين ما وصى به نوحا. All right, we're trying to figure out what the mithaq is, or what is the convent. What were we connecting ourselves with? All right, so let's say the first ayah, شرع لكم من الدين ما وصى به نوحا, that the Lord Almighty had permitted from the religion, in other words, legislated from the religion, what he had taken upon, let's say, Nuh, and those that were revealed unto you, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and what Ibrahim, Musa, and Isa were, what was taken upon them to act upon, that they should apply the religion, apply the faith, and not go in separation away from it. And of course, the mushrikeen, they find that as something major where they don't want to act upon it. And whatever you call them to, that isn't to follow the faith of the Lord Almighty, they find it a very big burden. And the Lord Almighty chooses whom he wills, and the Lord Almighty chooses whom he or anoints for guidance whom he wills. Now I want you to go back to it. What was the page 14? Let's go back to page 14 again. Now I want you to see this page right there. Let's do it again. So here, الذين ينقضون عهد الله. Notice how the ayah we just went to in Surah Shura said شرع لكم ما وصى به نوحا. That was what the Lord Almighty had actually sent unto Prophet Nuh. وما وصينا به إبراهيم وموسى وعيسى, to do what? And أقيموا الدين, to implement the deen and not go away from the connection, that line connection. Think of it as a chain from one prophet to another. What was the chain in regards to stay away from shirk? That's number one. Number two, to implement the legislature that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent. Now, this is the chain. Scholars actually had differences of opinions on when we're talking about ينقضون عهد الله, because the word ahd can mean foundation as well. So what does that actually mean, the core? What does that make the core as? The core as the fitrah. All right. What is the core? The core is actually the fitrah. What is the fitrah containing of? When we want to speak about any core, there's something inside the core. We know, even when we're talking about an atom, we've got the nucleus, and inside the nucleus, you got the protons, electrons, and the protons, and all these different things inside, right? Well, at least the electrons are going outside, all right? But in the end is that there's the core. There's something that makes the DNA of it. There's something that makes the core of it, all right? Now, the core of the fitrah, it really contains of those two elements. The fitrah contains of the element of La ilaha illallah, which is why وَإِذْ أَخَذَ رَبُّكَ مِنْ بَنِي آدَمَ مِنْ ظُهُورِهِمْ وَأَشْهَدَهُمْ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ. When your Lord Almighty took from the backs of Adam and made them witnesses upon themselves, أَلَسْتُ بِرَبِّكُمْ. There's the core. Am I not your Lord? What core is that? That's the core of the inside of you, which is why, speaking about that core, in the following page, it takes you back to the core of how the core of your existence really started when the malaika were put to stand in front of everyone. And right there, the Lord Almighty asked them about, do you know what I'm going to create? Do you know what this is? Do you know? We're going to get to it. Are you lost?
I'm not lost.
You're not lost.
The
Good.
fitrah still makes you question the existence of God. Even
Absolutely. So the fitrah is one side of the core, but that's not enough, because the fitrah in the existence of Allah Almighty, That's one side of the core. There's the other side. So if God created me, what does he want of me? That's the legislature part. Now, this is al-huda and al-kitab.
Yeah, yes.
Got it?
I was not lost. When you taught me one day, Fitra, I really understood it. It's that for the person who is not a believer,
Mhm.
they do have the Fitra makes them question, but they struggle with the concept of Al-Kitab and Huda. But the person
Exactly.
who believes has both.
Absolutely. So that's why when we look at that, scholars actually had a number of different interpretations to the word al-ahd, and here mithaqihi. Some scholars said, well, al-ahd is really referring to the relationship between the different prophets and the message that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent with the rest of the prophets, just like in the ayah شرع لكم من الدين ما وصى به نوح والذي أوحينا إليك, just like the ayah in Surah Shura. And then and other scholars said that no, this is actually referring to al-huda and al-kitab. This is referring to al-huda and al-kitab, meaning the guidance, la ilaha illallah, and also the legislature. But then based on that core, that's why they said وَيَقْطَعُونَ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ بِهِ أَن يُوصَلَ. What is it referring to in terms of making sure that we're connecting things together? What are we really connecting here? Connecting what? So that's why we're going to get to it. I hope you guys don't get lost, okay? How many people are getting lost? Nobody?
The core was in the fridge for
The core.
Because that was
Well, now we
fasiqeen.
want to warm it up. We don't want to keep it in the fridge,
Okay.
all right?
But
Wanna-
that was fasiqeen.
that was al-fasiqeen. So
Okay.
the people that have exacerbated themselves away from the core, those are the people that are going to be easily slipping away from guidance. Why the word fasiq? Well, that's why I said right there, يَنْقُضُونَ عَهْدَ اللَّهِ. It is definitely, we've got one side of it, which is al-aqidah, which is tawheed. وَإِذَا أَخَذَ رَبُّكَ مِنْ بَنِي آدَمَ مِنْ ظُهُورِهِمْ, when the Lord Almighty took from the children of Adam and the backs of Adam, that is, and then made them witness on themselves. Am I not your Lord? Verily you are. But what happened? أَن تَقُولُوا إِنَّا كُنَّا عَنْ هَذَا غَافِلِينَ. They will just say, we were pacified away from that realization. What made you pacified? What made them pacified is really going after worldly matters. Going after worldly matters. I just want this dunya. I just want to engage. Never mind about later on. That I'll think about later. And then it becomes the fitna that gets them carried away in living this life and forgetting about the akhirah. So here, يَنْقُضُونَ عَهْدَ اللَّهِ is basically what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had taken also upon the prophets. Now, one thing is that al-fasiqeen is usually a description that is given to the Yahud, to the Jews. So why was it actually given to the Yahud oftentimes? Is the word fasiq necessarily a person that is a believer? No. The word fasiq actually can be close to somebody that is kafir because they had exacerbated themselves away from the core, which is al-iman billah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it can be that the word fasiq can also be a Muslim that exacerbated himself away from the core, from al-kitab. I want you guys to look at the core again.
Yes.
Core, Al-Iman Billah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The other segment of the core is really the application of tashri'ah, the application of legislature. So a person, if they exacerbate themselves away from the core of La ilaha illallah, they could still be called a fasiq, just like Bani Israel. They were called oftentimes as fasiqeen because they exacerbated themselves away from the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though they might have applied certain things that they were required in terms of legislature. All right? They might have applied a number of different things, but they were still called al-fasiqeen, which is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in many ayat, وَإِذَا أَخَذَ اللَّهُ مِيثَاقَ النَّبِيِّينَ لَمَا آتَيْنَاكُمْ مِنْ كِتَابٍ وَحِكْمَةٍ ثُمَّ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مُصَدِّقٌ لِمَا مَعَكُمْ لَتُؤْمِنُنَّ بِهِ وَلَتَنْصُرُنَّهُ. What was taken upon them? That they would believe in the Prophet ﷺ, that they would support the Prophet ﷺ, and that they would actually apply the legislature that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had taken upon them. Now let's move on right there. So when we look at on the other side, let's continue. Min ba'di mithaqihi. After it was tied, what was tied in it? So they destructed a foundation that was already tied. That was already tied to mean it was firm. What was firm? What was firm? The fitrah. The fitrah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it firm. There's a firm doctrine from the prophets, from the time of earlier prophets to the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And this actually, why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَيَقْطَعُونَ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ بِهِ أَن يُوصَلَ وَيُفْسِدُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. And they would disconnect what the Lord Almighty had ordered that it would be connected, and they would cause destruction. Pause right there.
So we are created to worship Allah.
Absolutely. This is the whole thing. Now, وَيَقْطَعُونَ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ بِهِ أَن يُوصَلَ. And that they would separate what the Lord Almighty had ordered that it would be connected. Now, scholars actually had differences of opinions on what is it referring to that the Lord Almighty would connect, that the Lord Almighty, or the people, these people would disconnect what the Lord Almighty had ordered that it would be connected. First opinion. It's the legacy of all the prophets. What is the legacy of all prophets? That you would connect the hidayah and the tashri'ah. That you would connect La ilaha illallah
In action.
and put it in action, which is aqidah and legislature. That's the first opinion. Second opinion is that in the beginning of early life, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent the prophets, and prophet after prophet, they all came with one message: to disconnect the Prophet Muhammad from the rest of the prophets and disconnect it as if it wasn't part of the chain, even though the Yahud knew that he was part of that chain connection of prophets. They said that's another ta'wil. The third opinion said, يَقْطَعُونَ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ بِهِ أَن يُوصَلَ. In application, it's actually disconnecting between what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had regarded as in terms of La ilaha illallah and in terms of the details in action. What details in action? The details in action, we're going to jump. This is page 14. You guys pay attention. We're going to jump onto 2 more pages, I believe. All right, it's ayah 84. Hold on. You guys stay, keep that ayah in your mind. All right. Let's see what they were ordered to do. Okay, hold on. Here we go. There's that mithaq, the word mithaq again. Just a couple pages from that line, because it's going to come back to you. The Quran is all coherent. All right, it's all coherent. So right there, just a couple pages, it said, وَإِذَا أَخَذْنَا مِيثَاقَ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ. And when we had taken upon, again, the word mithaq, was it that the word that we were just on?
Yes.
Right? That was the same word. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains it in detail. وَيَقْطَعُونَ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ بِهِ أَن يُوصَلَ وَيُفْسِدُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. So when this ayah explains it in detail, let me first translate that little, that translation right there. When we had taken upon the children, that is the mithaq right there, the convent, upon the children of Israel, that they would not worship but Allah Almighty. There's the first segment of it. And in terms of application, and for both parents, that they would act in kindness with them, with their relatives, with the orphans, with the needy, and they would tell people good and speak with the people in good terms, and they would perform salah, give the zakah, and then you had turned away except very few from you, and then you had left and turned your backs away. Now, remember the ayah. We're going to come back. What page is this? 21. We're going to come back to it. We're going to see the comparison. All right, let's go back to it. The other page was 21. Let's see this one. So right there, ينقضون عهد الله من بعد ميثاقه. What is ينقضون عهد الله? Let's compare the ayat. ينقضون عهد الله. What does it say in ayah number 20, in that ayah 84? Let's go back to it. I want you guys to compare it. What was that ayah saying? Here, أخذنا ألا تعبدوا إلا الله. There's that explanation. All right, let's see. In that ayah, وَيَقْطَعُونَ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ بِهِ أَن يُوصَلَ. And they would disconnect what the Lord Almighty had ordered to connect. Connect what? Connect with the parents. All right, connect with the parents. Connect with the relatives. Connect with the needy. The ayah said, وَيَقْطَعُونَ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ بِهِ أَن يُوصَلَ. Up to here, this is what the Lord Almighty أَمَرَ أَن يُوصَلَ. What am I ordered to connect? Who am I ordered to connect with? Your parents and your relatives and your brothers and your siblings, your aunts and your aunts and your mothers and your aunts and all these. This is Silat al-Rahim. All right? Now, وَيُفْسِدُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ basically means to cause destruction. What is the destruction relating to? Relating to the orphans, relating to the needy, and relating to acting badly and humiliating and speaking ill with people. You see it right there? You see the details? So this ayah is basically giving us more details on what was a little obscure in that ayah that we just laid out previously. Here's the detail. You guys see it?
That's the connection.
There's the connection. There's the connection. Let's go back. We're here. وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ. And then we're going to get back to it. You have to connect those ayat together because you're going to start thinking like, okay, where's that obscure part of it? So then the ayah continues to actually give you more details. وَيَقْطَعُونَ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ بِهِ أَن يُوصَلَ وَيُفْسِدُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْخَاسِرُونَ. So what does it mean? That al-fasiqeen are al-khasirun. Got it? So al-fasiqeen are the ones that are going to be the ones to be incur loss. What is the core now? Well, the core is actually in two segments. The core is in abstaining away from shirk, and the other piece of it is actually abstaining away from disconnecting when it comes to legislature between whether we're talking about the relationship within the society or whether, which is legislature. What is legislature relating? Legislature is actually relating how you organize and regulate the social relations. Social relations is really one piece of it is financial relations.
Yes.
That's what makes up our connection. Where either it's money, it's social, it's my right, your right, and all the fighting is really about property.
And rights.
That's rights are really within money, right? When we talk about rights, we're really talking about money usually, right? So here, وَيَقْطَعُونَ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ بِهِ أَن يُوصَلَ وَيُفْسِدُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. Again, whether it's speaking about the legislature part, or whether it's speaking about the kitab and the details of the details of al-kitab, or in here, Ahd Allah is the fitrah. Ahd Allah is the fitrah. Ahd Allah is basically the hidayah. Am I connecting the hidayah and the kitab?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Don't question the kitab and the hidayah.
Good. So now it brings in the second, we're getting closer to the end, inshallah. كيف تكفرون بالله وكنتم أمواتا فأحياكم. Now it wants to come to you. Wait a minute. Since we laid out the foundation that there is a purpose or there is the subject for your test, the subject for your test is within the core that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put within you and how you apply it in action. Well, let's take you to the second. Since you realize this core, well, let's take you to the second piece of that core. كيف تكفرون? How would you, the word تكفرون is actually in two things. One, تكفرون can mean the denial of the Lord Almighty and can also mean the denial of the blessings to belonging to someone. In other words, that someone gave it to you. All right. So what does that mean? It simply means that if you deny the Lord Almighty, you're denying that He was the one that gave you the blessings. You're basically denying the graciousness, the Lord Almighty. You're basically denying all the blessings that are actually coming from Him Almighty. You're denying it and attributing it to yourself or someone else. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, like, just relax right there and ask yourself, how would you actually deny the Lord Almighty and deny that the bounties are coming from Him when you were dead and then the Lord Almighty brought you to life? Well, you were dead and then He brought you to life. Wait a minute. How are we dead? Well, you were not existent, but the Lord Almighty brought you to life. At one point, you were actually considered not existent. In other words, you were at one point dead. ثُمَّ يُمِيتُكُمْ. And then I want you to look at this word. This is a passive verb again here. ثُمَّ يُمِيتُكُمْ. Then He will bring you to death. In other words, you won't have the ability to stop it. And that's why it came in a passive verb with the same passive verb. ثُمَّ يُحْيِيكُمْ. And then He will bring you back to life. In other words, and again, you will not have the ability to stop this pattern, this power that the Lord Almighty will impose on you. You're not going to be able to stop it, just like you were brought to life and you had no power to stop it. Well, the same thing. ثُمَّ يُحْيِيكُمْ. Then He'll bring you back to life and you can't stop it. ثُمَّ إِلَيْهِ تُرْجَعُونَ. And then you will be brought back to Him, and again you will not be able to stop it. In other words, right there, your energy and all your power that you thought you had, right there, you cannot bring yourself to life. You were not able to bring yourself to life. You were not able to stop death from coming to you. And certainly you're not going to be able to stop from letting life come back to you. And certainly you're not going to be able to stop yourself from going back to your Lord Almighty.
That's a good chapter for the atheists.
Absolutely.
They should have that.
Absolutely. It's taking in our mind just a moment to think about it. If you actually thought that you are in full power, what power have you given yourself to actually come even to life? They're going to say it's just matter in motion.
What about that?
What about death?
Keep yourself.
Keep yourself. There you go. There you go. Subhanallah الذي قهر عباده بالموت. Seriously, subhanallah. How are you going to bring that to you? Same thing when we're talking about so many different things. How are you going to bring any? If you thought that that was just a natural force that nature brought in, how is it that nature was capable of thinking and processing ideas? How is nature capable of thinking to process an idea, to put in a purpose? You look at that. That's why one of the biggest, I always say this, one of the biggest things that atheists would fall in awe on is really human reproduction. Because they would speak about human reproduction, that humans evolved and etc. But why is the male and the female both related to each other in such a complex way, in human reproduction, such a complex way, that why did the female evolve in a way that relates to the male to evolve in a certain way, if they were somehow going into an evolution to create reproduction, why did each evolve in a totally different way to continue one main mission, human reproduction. The human reproduction is probably the most sophisticated.
But it's the easiest to break. Why others are not coming? Men, women. Like, why is another? If it's
You know what? There's
others continue.
there are actually some books in just speaking about that, and there are a number of different books just scrutinizing this piece of it and how sophisticated human reproduction is, and how this is, even if we're to assume that human reproduction or human evolution is real, why did female evolve in a certain way and male evolve in a certain way? Yet you cannot have both of them actually make human being. You know, what we're talking about, from the chromosomes to the sperm to the egg to in such a sophisticated way. Such a sophisticated, you just fall in complete awe. You just fall in complete awe when it comes to that. That was, you know, that I enjoy very much listening to a guy, such a teddy bear, really. His name is John Lennox. And he's a mathematician at Oxford University. And he does a lot of debates with a lot of the atheists. John Lennox, he even debated Richard Dawkins, and does an outstanding job in, you know.
He's dead.
Richard, who?
John Lennox.
Did he die?
Yeah.
When?
I don't know. He debated Dawkins is dead.
No, Dawkins is not dead. Hawkins is dead.
Okay. Charles, did you say?
We're talking about Richard Dawkins, not.
Okay, I don't know that one.
Yeah. Okay.
I thought
He's basically the guy that wrote the God Delusion.
Evolution?
The God Delusion.
Okay.
Believe it or
Talk
not,
about
that book is
evolution.
actually a main topic, is actually a main book, a textbook to read by most of the students at the U of M, and the different, you know, it's like, it's really laid out the foundation of atheism right there. All right. هو الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا. Well, if he created you from the beginning out of nothing, and then he created the different elements that your existence is actually in need for, it depends on it. خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا. Created all the different elements for you to live on, in other words, to dwell in this earth. خلق لكم, created for you. In other words, how would you deny your Lord Almighty when not only did he create you out of nothing, but he even created the different elements for you to dwell on earth, everything. And then the Lord Almighty استوى إلى السماء. And the Lord Almighty went on the throne and he made them into 7 skies, and he's capable of knowing everything. What is that laying a foundation for? That's laying actually the foundation of Aqidah, that in terms of your existence is actually dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fully. That's number one. Number two is that when you were created, the reason for your creation actually came before your creation. What does that mean? That purpose preceded existence. Are you guys with me here?
Yes.
Purpose preceded existence. When we say purpose preceded existence, that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually came to you and actually said, all right, speaking of purpose coming before existence, you could see that the Lord Almighty's knowledge supersedes all, supersedes your knowledge, supersedes your existence. And therefore, let's take you back to the story of what preceded your own existence. Let's go back to the story. And وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ, when your Lord Almighty told the angels, إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً, I will be creating on earth a vicegerent. Khalifa actually means another another creature that comes after another creation. قالوا أتجعل فيها. We're going to do a general tafsir for this part, and then next week we'll actually do a more detailed tafsir. All right? Pay attention with this one, you guys. I know you guys are already right now, saturated. How many people are saturated? Nobody saturated? All right, you guys are then ready. All right, let's see. So then the malaika responded, are you going to create within it, that is al-ard, because that's the nearest noun that was mentioned. Are you going to create within it who will cause destruction and cause bloodshed? And we are here glorifying you and praising you. وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ, and we are worshiping you. قَالَ إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. The Lord Almighty responds, I know what you don't know. And he taught Adam all the names and then introduced them to the malaika. He told them, tell me about the names if you are صادقين, if you really know that is. قالوا, they responded, glory be to you, we do not know except what you had taught us. You are the all-knowing and all-wise. He told Adam, inform them of their names. And then when he informed them of their names, he said, that is the Lord Almighty, have I not told you that I know the unseen and the heavens and the earth, and I know what you reveal and what you conceal.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
I think that is my husband, right?
Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
Should we stop right here then? We'll stop right here, inshallah. We'll continue next week. Got 15 minutes for Salah. All right. So inshallah, we'll continue next week. We'll go in more details. I know we didn't answer questions. So assalamu alaikum everyone, but inshallah we'll continue and answer the questions next week, inshallah.